The anime begins with a legend. It is said that when the demons awaken from the depths of darkness, they will turn the world into hell. On that day, the goddess of fate will choose 6 heroes and grant them the power to save the world. Since they are always 6, they are known as the Braves of the 6 Flowers. In the next scene, we move to the Kingdom of Piena, where the semi-finals of the Divine Tournament are about to begin. The announcer declares that the match will be between the captain of the Royal Guard, Betrayal Rainhawk, and the representative of the Red Bear Mercenaries, Quado Gain. He reminds everyone that the duel will be held in the presence of the great king of Piena and the goddess of fate herself, and asks the competitors to offer a fair fight, as the winner will face the champion of the previous tournament, Princess Nashatania. But before the match can start, the event is suddenly interrupted by a young man named Adlet and Fmy, who boldly proclaims himself to be the strongest man in the world. To everyone's surprise, he asks for the rules to be changed so that both fighters can face him at the same time. Hearing this, Quado Gain orders the guards to remove him, but when they try to surround Adlet, he defeats them with ease, astonishing the crowd. For this reason, both Quado and Rainhawk decide to fight him together, but Adlet easily evades their attacks. Then, he throws smoke bombs and uses the confusion to take down his opponents. After defeating them, he apologizes for injuring them with an extremely painful poison. Finally, he announces his name to everyone once again and proclaims to the goddess that he is the strongest man in the world. He then demands to be chosen as one of the 6 Braves. Before he can finish his declaration, the guards knock him down. Adlet sees the entire audience turn against him, even the spectators. The scene changes. In prison, the tournament announcer warns him that he will not escape punishment for desecrating a sacred tournament. Adlet, unfazed, takes a nap until he is interrupted by a young woman who tells him she's a fan. She says she wants to know more about him, so she asks if they can talk. Adlet agrees and tells her he was born in Wuro, in the country of the White Lakes. At the age of 10, he left everything behind to live with his master, Atro Spiker, and spend every hour training, because his goal was to defeat the demon god, and his entire fighting style was created for that sole purpose. Adlet then asks the young woman what happened with the tournament. She explains that they simply restarted the fight he interrupted. When the young woman heard him, she was fascinated by his story, but she pointed out that if he wanted to be the strongest in the world, he'd first have to defeat Nashatania. He told her he knew that, and that's exactly why he'd been hoping she would show up when he interrupted the tournament. But since she hadn't, he was sure he was better than the princess, and that there was no one stronger than him anywhere in the world. She asked why he believed that, and he said he just knew, just like the goddess of fate knew. That's why, he said, he had to prove it not only to the demon god, but to the whole world. Adlet then asked what happened to the tournament, and she told him they'd just repeated the match he had interrupted and that Quado won the semi-final, but in the final, Nashatania completely destroyed him. Adlet finds this strange, since he thought the older man was the stronger of the two. She suggests maybe he lost because Adlet injured his shoulder. While Adlet regrets having influenced the result, the young woman asks why he calls himself the strongest in the world. He answers that he does so because it's the truth, and that means he will inevitably be chosen as one of the 6 Braves. She asks why he wants to become one of them, and he explains that his goal is to defeat the demon god. That's also why he attended the tournament, because he knows the story of the Saint of the Flower. The young woman says she knows it too. Long ago, a demon appeared on the continent and began attacking people. This demon not only killed, but also split its own body to create other demons known as fiends. The armies of the Eternal Empire Rohan were completely defeated, leading to the Empire's downfall. The royal family was slaughtered, and its cities vanished from the map. In the midst of despair, the people resigned themselves to their fate. It was then that the saint appeared. Because she carried a flower in her hand, she was called the Saint of the Flower. After a long battle, she managed to drive the demon god to the far west of the continent and defeat him. However, when she returned, she warned the people that the demon god was still alive and that one day he would awaken from his slumber to turn the world into hell. She also prophesied that when that day came, 6 heroes would appear, bearing her power to destroy him. Adlet adds that in order to be chosen, candidates must prove themselves in the temples of the goddess of fate. If they succeed, the mark of the 6-petaled flower appears on their body. Hearing this, the young woman continues her story. 700 years ago, the first Braves appeared. Their names were Volmer, the heroic king, Bahna of the holy bow, Polka, the saint of fire, Sunimur, the saint of ice, Amy, the saint of the sun, and Ange, the nameless warrior. Alongside the demon god, there also emerged Zoaflare, the demon king, whom the Braves managed to hold back long enough to allow their master's defeat. 300 years later, the Braves appeared again to challenge the demon god. This time they were Mahri, Hayuha, Melrania, Bodal, Roy, and Manyakam, and although some of them were lost, they succeeded in sealing him away. Upon hearing this, Adlet reveals that after the demon god's last appearance, numerous monsters have begun appearing in the last 10 years. She informs him that the prophetic jewel has cracked and the crystal that signals the demon king has darkened. This makes it likely that the demon god will revive this year. Adlet responds that if that's the case, he will soon be chosen as one of the 6 braves. She then asks if he knows the knight Matora Wichita from the country of yellow fruits. Adlet says yes, he's known as the best archer in the world. The young woman then mentions Fudelka from the country of golden sands and Asure, the saint of ice. As she approaches him, she reveals that all of them have been killed. Adlet concludes that someone is trying to eliminate potential braves before the demon god awakens. She also tells him she doesn't believe the fiends were responsible for killing them, and advises him to remain in prison until he recovers, since the prisons are heavily guarded. He replies that it doesn't seem that way, considering how easily she managed to get in. The young woman laughs and says she should leave before people get angry with her. Before she goes, Adlet asks her to tell the princess she'd better become one of the braves, because he looks forward to the day they can join forces. His words leave the young woman without a reply, though she promises to deliver the message. As she walks away, she thinks to herself that he doesn't seem very bright. The next day, Adlet is informed that he will be imprisoned for life. He is taken to a pit where human bones lie scattered. Settling into rest, he finds a weapon and an apple. Days pass, and Adlet survives easily in his cell, but boredom begins to get to him, and he wonders if he should start planning an escape. Meanwhile, in town, everyone hears a monstrous voice that disturbs them. Suddenly, the sun seems to rise while it's still night. A guard notices that the light comes from Gwenbyre, beyond which lies the land of the fiends. They conclude that the demon god may be about to awaken. The scene shifts back to Adlet. Alarmed, he sees something mysterious approaching him, until he realizes that the mark of the 6-petaled flower has appeared on his body. Overjoyed, he begins shouting to the guards that he has been chosen as one of the 6 braves. Before they arrive, Princess Nashitania appears at his cell. She introduces herself and reveals that she has also been chosen. Hearing this, Adlet introduces himself as the strongest man in the world. The princess then shows off some of her power and frees him from the cell. Immediately afterward, she locks all the guards inside the cell Adlet had been occupying. The 2 of them flee quickly to where horses await, prepared by the princess, and ride away from the kingdom. Adlet tells her they'll first head to his hideout, then to Gwenbyre in the Iron Mountains, and finally to the land of the fiends, where the chosen braves are meant to gather. The next scene opens with Adlet and Nashitania continuing their journey, relieved that, for now, they no longer seem to be pursued. Adlet tells the princess that they'll soon be leaving Pina and entering Fandine. They come across a fruit orchard, and Nashitania is completely fascinated because she's never seen one before. For fun, she takes a piece of fruit from a merchant's cart and tastes it. She then confesses to Adlet that when she was little, she thought fruit grew directly on plates. Adlet isn't surprised, considering she's a princess. Moments later, Nashitania spots a cart loaded with carrots and decides to take one and eat it raw, this time genuinely surprising Adlet. Later that day, while they prepare to rest, the princess uses her powers to cut up their food. Adlet watches closely, intrigued. When she notices, she decides to show off even more, prompting Adlet to wonder aloud if this is the power of a saint. She asks if he's ever met another saint before, and he says yes. In fact, he even knew one personally. She was a strange girl who didn't like being a saint at all, which surprises Nashitania. The princess then asks if he would like to have the powers of a saint, as so many people wish for. Adlet replies that he wouldn't. He's already the strongest man in the world, and besides, saints can only be women. Nashitania laughs and says she intends to make the most of the power granted to her by a god who apparently prefers women. Then, out of nowhere, she attacks him playfully, saying it shouldn't be so hard for him to dodge her strikes. Annoyed by her games, Adlet scolds her. She apologizes for teasing him and admits that because of her peculiar behavior, her servants often became annoyed with her, and her father rarely paid her any attention. Sometimes, she says, she wonders if she's just a bother to others. Adlet, a bit awkward, tells her it wasn't such a big deal. She laughs and asks if he thought she was sad, leaving him confused. She reassures him that she doesn't get depressed so easily, and that he doesn't need to worry about her. The scene shifts to the 2 of them traveling again. Nashitania tries to calm Adlet down since he's still annoyed by her earlier attitude. He ignores her and reminds her that they're about to face the demon god, so she needs to stop playing around. Hearing this, she promises it won't happen again, admitting that all of this is new to her. Even though she understands the importance of their mission, she says she can't help but feel excited. That night, as they rest, Nashitania tells Adlet about a civil war in Piena 6 years ago. Adlet says he didn't know anything about it because he was training in the mountains at the time. She then sadly reveals that her father was blamed for starting the war, which left him as nothing more than a powerless puppet ruler. Adlet asks if the Prime Minister holds the real power, and she confirms it. She goes on to say that after losing both her mother and her older brother, she's the only one left in the royal family. Nashitania confides that Adlet is the first person she can speak to as an equal about how she truly feels. Adlet tells her he treats her as an equal because they're both heroes, then tosses her his coat so she won't feel so cold. He warns her that they'll have to sleep outdoors for a while and the ground can be hard. She replies that she's used to it. During the Civil War, her father even ordered her execution. That was before she became the Saint of Blades, and she was forced to live as a fugitive for a long time. Back then, the only thing she wished for was a night without fearing for her life. That's why she says that if sleeping on the ground now means granting that same peace to the rest of the world, she'll do it countless times. Proud of her determination, Adlet tells her to get some sleep, since they'll need to wake up early. The next morning, Adlet wakes up to find Nashitania watching the sunrise. He joins her, and she tells him that watching the dawn gives her peace and tranquility, even with the demon god awakening. Adlet replies that this peace will disappear if they lose. Resting her head on his shoulder, she tells him they must work hard to make sure that doesn't happen. In the following scene, they resume their journey. Nashitania talks about Goldoff Awara, who left 6 months ago to find the hero killer. Adlet asks if he's the leader of the Blackhorn Knights, and she confirms it. She says his last message was that he'd found no leads, and they haven't heard from him since. Adlet suggests that maybe the killer got to him, but Nashitania dismisses the idea, saying Goldoff is strong. Adlet reminds her that she defeated him last year, but she irritably explains that he let her win at the last second, something that greatly frustrated her. That's why she made him promise not to die until she could pay him back for that humiliation, and why she's certain he's still alive. Even so, she admits she's a little worried, since Goldoff is only 16. Adlet points out that they're both 18, so the difference isn't much. He then asks if there have been any more victims of the hero killer, and she says no. Somewhat embarrassed, Nashitania tells him that Ryura, the Saint of the Sun, has been missing for a month. This surprises Adlet. He recalls that when he was young, Ryura destroyed an enemy castle with scorching lightning from the sky. However, he complains that because of her advanced age, she could no longer be considered a potential brave, so he doubts the killer would target her. Nashitania admits that's exactly why she doesn't know whether she should report her disappearance. Adlet tells her it doesn't matter, because sooner or later they'll run into the killer and have to face them. While crossing a bridge, he says they'll soon reach Gwenbyre, and that with only 10 days left to reach the Land of the Fiends, they need to move quickly. The scene shifts. On the road, they encounter people fleeing from Gwenbyre. This catches Nashitania's attention. Adlet warns her that they'll probably be attacked soon, because the enemy wants to prevent the Braves from meeting. He explains that this was how one of the heroes from the past died, adding that his master taught him a lot about it. Later, Adlet notices that Nashitania is distracted and asks if she's nervous. She denies it, though she clearly is. He tells her to relax, reminding her that the battle hasn't even started yet. He asks her to smile, but she says it's impossible because her hands won't stop trembling. When she looks at Adlet, she sees him making ridiculous faces, which makes her laugh and helps her calm down. Suddenly, they come across a family fleeing from monsters. The father tells Adlet that his friends and his youngest son were left behind. Adlet tells Nashitania to follow him, suspecting it might be a trap. Even so, he decides to check, and when they arrive, they see monsters attacking villagers. Adlet thinks to himself that the strongest man in the world can't abandon them and jumps into the fight. He uses fire to take out a group of monsters, with a little help from the princess, then plays a flute to lure the rest in and finish them off more easily. Even so, one monster manages to lunge at Nashitania, but she somehow defeats it with ease. Adlet praises her performance, saying it didn't seem like it was her first time. Exhausted, she admits it was her first real battle and that it was only thanks to him keeping her in the rear guard. She promises she'll be more useful from now on, and Adlet says he's counting on her. After the fight, Adlet approaches the villagers to ask if there were people who didn't make it out. He learns that a female traveler is still alone in the village, which drives him to go check immediately. But Nashitania stops him, sadly telling him that since there are only 2 of them, they can't save everyone. As much as it pains her, she says they should continue their journey. This makes Adlet reflect on how difficult their mission will be. Even so, he decides to go back to the village to search for the traveler, leaving Nashitania behind. He thinks that to defeat the demon god and truly be the strongest in the world, he must also save people. Meanwhile, the princess tries to follow him, but monsters appear in her path, threatening the villagers. Adlet, for his part, searches through the village and finds an iron ball lodged in the body of one of the dead monsters. From the number of enemies it killed, he realizes the traveler wasn't defenseless at all. Soon after, he sees her in the distance and is struck by her appearance. He watches as she uses her powers to help some animals, but she quickly notices him. She asks who he is, but instead of answering directly, Adlet asks if she likes dogs. She says yes, though she admits she hates humans, and then points her weapon at him, reminding him to answer her question. Adlet introduces himself and tells her he's one of the 6 braves, just like her. The young woman says her name is Fmy Speeddraw, then fires a warning shot, telling him not to come closer. Irritated, Adlet steps toward her anyway. Fmy asks if he's come to kill her. He says no, precisely because they're both braves. She answers that this is exactly why she asked. Meanwhile, after finishing off the monsters, Nashatania is saddened to see that her horse has died. Suddenly, she hears hoofbeats, and thinking it's Adlet, she turns. But it's Goldoff Awara. Goldoff apologizes for arriving late and tells her he's come to help, since he too has been chosen as one of the 6 braves. He promises that, if necessary, he'll protect her with his life. Frustrated, Nashatania reminds him that they're comrades and, as heroes, should protect each other. But Goldoff insists that she's special and no one should lay a hand on her. The princess allows him to continue treating her as he always has, then asks if he has any news about the hero killer. Goldoff says no, but he has obtained one crucial lead. He's learned the killer's name and appearance. Finally, he reveals that the hero killer is a white-haired marksman named Fmy. Elsewhere, Fmy tells Adlet that she's heard of him before. In Piena's tournament, people called him the Cowardly Warrior. Adlet interrupts her and insists that he's actually the strongest man in the world, because doing whatever it takes to win isn't cowardly. Besides, he adds, a coward wouldn't declare himself the strongest. He tells her to lower her weapon. Fmy asks if he came with anyone. Adlet answers that maybe Nashatania, the princess of Piena, is nearby. Upon hearing this, she orders him to tell Nashatania and anyone else he meets that her name is Fmy Speeddraw, the saint of gunpowder. She warns that she won't travel with them because she intends to face the demon god alone, and for that reason, she wants to be left in peace. Then, Fmy asks Adlet if he'll remember everything she said. When the protagonist tries to get closer, she fires again. While she runs off, Adlet, annoyed, grabs his horse's gear and goes after her. But no matter how fast he rides, he can't catch up. He decides to track her, but Fmy has hidden her trail well, leaving distractions along the way. Even so, after stopping to think, Adlet manages to find her, which surprises Fmy when she sees his tracking skills. After a long chase, Adlet intercepts her. She asks why he's following her. He says he doesn't know. She threatens to shoot if he continues. Adlet scolds her, reminding her that she can't defeat the demon god alone, because if the 6 heroes don't work together, they'll lose. Fmy, defiant, says she'll prove she can win without anyone's help. He asks why she wants to avoid meeting the other heroes, and she replies that it's because they're going to kill her. Seeing his confusion, she says they have 3 options. First, listen to her reasons and then try to kill her. Second, don't listen to her reasons and try to kill her anyway. Or third, turn around and walk away. Adlet chooses the first. Fmy warns that if she tells him her reasons, she'll try to kill him, but either way, she's going to face the demon god alone. She adds that she'd rather never see him again and walks away. Tired of the back and forth, Adlet throws a smoke bomb to disarm her. Then he tells her he's going with her, because if she doesn't kill him right then, he might just run off with her belongings. She demands her things back, but Adlet explains that his master once told him something about firearms. They're useless without ammunition. That's why he's keeping her bullets, to make sure she can't threaten him. He admits he still doesn't understand why she wants to go alone to where the demon god is, or why she believes the other heroes want to kill her. Still, he says, the strongest man in the world never abandons one of his own, which is why he's decided to help her. He tells her to follow him, and Fmy hesitates. Even with him walking ahead and giving her a perfect chance, she can't pull the trigger. Using a mirror, Adlet checks and confirms that Fmy has decided to follow him, relieved she didn't shoot. Meanwhile, Princess Nashatania and Goldoff fight a new monster and easily defeat it. Suddenly, another monster catches Nashatania off guard, and Goldoff unleashes his power to save her. Then, Goldoff sees Adlet's horse arriving with a message for the princess. Goldoff asks who sent it, and she tells him it was Adlet Mayer, surprising him. After all, this is the man who ruined the tournament. But Nashatania tells him to calm down, assuring him that Adlet is trustworthy, even if he's decided to leave her alone for now. The scene shifts to the princess and Goldoff continuing their journey. Goldoff says that according to Rainhawk, Adlet tricked him during the tournament and even kidnapped her. The princess replies that Adlet is a good person and that they'll get along fine. Back with Adlet, he walks alongside Fmy and tells her that, even though he doesn't fully understand what's going on, he plans to protect her because she's one of them. She tells him to shut up and keep walking, because he's starting to annoy her. Later, Adlet says his master told him that firearms were invented 30 years ago. However, they aren't very powerful, take time to fire, and aren't useful against monsters. But since Fremmy's gun has killed so many, he wonders if it's a special upgraded weapon or if it's because she's the saint of gunpowder. He asks where her temple is, and if she has any spare explosives she can give him. She ignores him, so he complains, and Fmy says he's arrogant and impulsive. Adlet holds back his temper until she suggests he go back to Nashitania if he's so worried about her. He denies it, saying that right now, Fmy is the one he's most worried about. She laughs and admits she never thought Nashitania would be chosen as a hero. That's why she doesn't expect much from this generation of braves. Adlet says she's wrong. Nashitania is a capable fighter, though inexperienced compared to the strongest man in the world. He also reminds Fmy that she can always count on him, to which she replies that he's ridiculous. Later, to Adlet's surprise, Fmy asks him for a favor. She knows there's a good chance they'll end up trying to kill each other someday, and if that moment comes, she wants him to show her mercy. While he could cut her down with his sword, she doesn't want him to finish her off. He says that if she's going to ask for something, it should be that they fight together. That annoys her, since she says he won't grant that request anyway. As they look out over the land of the fiends, Fmy tells Adlet she can't die until she defeats the demon god with her own hands. Adlet says they need to meet the other braves at the isthmus that connects the peninsula to the continent. He's surprised by the strange color of the land, and Fmy explains that any human who steps foot there will die within a day, except the 6 braves who are immune thanks to the divine protection of the goddess of fate. Adlet spots a fortress that's been attacked and tells Fmy he's worried about it. He suggests they investigate. Upon arrival, they both feel exhausted from the intense heat. Fmy warns that if she sees a hero inside, she'll run away. Adlet understands and returns her bullets. They reach the fortress gate, where Adlet asks if any heroes are inside. The guards say others passed through 2 days ago and left. Relieved, Adlet tells Fmy there won't be a problem, and they enter, greeted by a man named Lauren. Lauren explains that he's in charge because both the general and the captains were killed. As they walk among the monster corpses, he says they were protecting something important. When Adlet asks what, Lauren reveals that Gwenbyre's king prepared a special resource to aid the 6 braves. He leads them to a room and explains that the king developed a way to seal off the entrance to the peninsula once the braves are inside. It's the Phantom Barrier, created with the combined powers of the Saints of Mist, Illusions, and Salt. This barrier will trap the monsters in the forest, keeping them from entering or leaving the thick fog it creates. He shows them the temple from which the barrier is activated, well protected from monster attacks. Mora, the saint of the mountain and a member of the 6 braves, will be waiting there. When everyone is gathered, she will send a signal for them to come and activate the barrier. Lauren also warns that if they're defeated before meeting up, another signal will be sent, and in that case, any of the 6 can go to the temple to activate it. Adlet points out that if that happens, one hero won't be able to enter the land of the fiends. Lauren confirms this and shows them a replica of the temple's altar to teach them how to activate it. Adlet practices once, saying it's easy, and promises to remember the steps. Finally, Lauren escorts them to the exit and tells them how to reach the meeting point in 3 hours. On the way, Adlet thinks it might be a problem if the others are already there. Fmy tells him to be quiet because she's thinking, but he suggests they simply join the rest. She refuses, saying that if they do, the others will try to kill each other, unlike with him, which was a special case. Adlet insists they must work together to defeat the demon god, and promises to protect her if it comes to a fight. Suddenly, Fmy stops and says she thinks he's a kind person, but she wants him to stop being kind to her because it makes her want to kill him. Adlet is irritated, but just then, he notices they're being attacked and jumps to protect her. At that moment, Nashitania yells at Adlet to get away from Fmy, while Goldoff moves in to strike at the white-haired girl. Adlet quickly steps in to stop Goldoff and tells Fmy not to attack the princess. He also orders Nashitania to stop. Fmy, for her part, reminds him that she warned him this fight would happen sooner or later, and tells him not to be surprised. Adlet, furious, demands to know what his companions think they're doing. Goldoff tells him not to get in the way and punches him, but Adlet responds by throwing dirt into Goldoff's eyes. Fmy seizes the moment to fire her weapon, but Adlet manages to block her shot. Immediately, Adlet orders everyone to stop. insisting that Fmy is not their enemy because she's one of the 6 braves. Nashitania, surprised, listens as he shows her that Fmy also bears the mark of the 6 petals. Adlet then asks why they attacked her. The princess explains that it's because Fmy is actually the hero killer. Fmy confirms this, admitting to Adlet that she has killed several potential heroes. She even confesses that Goldoff and Nashitania were among her targets, though she can't say the same about him. Adlet asks if she also killed the Saint of the Sun, but Fmy replies that she knows nothing about her, even though she was on her target list. At that moment, Nashitania calls Adlet over, but he ignores her. He asks Fmy again why she killed potential heroes. She answers that it was to revive the demon god, ensuring that the chosen braves would be weak warriors. Hearing this, Goldoff declares that now it's clear she's their enemy, but as he and Nashitania move to attack, Adlet steps between them. He says that no matter how strong someone is, anyone who wants to revive the demon god could never be chosen as a brave. Besides, he's certain that even if Fmy has killed people, she doesn't truly want to revive the demon god. That means there must be a reason she wants to fight the very being she claims she wanted to bring back. Fmy admits that's true. Adlet shouts for them to believe her because her desire to defeat their enemy is real. He acknowledges that she was an enemy to the Braves, but now she's on their side, and if they don't back down, he'll fight alongside her. Goldoff readies himself for a fight, but Nashitania stops him, saying she'll accept what Adlet says. If he insists, she has no choice but to follow his lead, and she asks Goldoff to do the same. Adlet breathes a sigh of relief, though the princess warns him to be careful because he tends to be too naive. He then demands that Fmy lower her weapon, assuring her that no one will kill her now. Nashitania approaches Fmy and says she doesn't trust her, but she's decided to trust Adlet's judgment. Fmy responds that if she trusts Adlet, then she's just as naive as he is. That irritates Goldoff, though he chooses not to reply. Later, Adlet asks about their horses for the journey, but Nashitania tells him they lost them during the battles. He asks if they spoke with Lauren, and she says yes, just recently. Adlet tells them that Mora is waiting for them and suggests they head to her quickly. As they travel through the forest, they notice a strange flock of birds. Adlet moves closer to get a better look and discovers they're actually flying monsters approaching fast. Soon, bombs begin raining from the sky, dropped by the creatures. Adlet shouts directions to the Temple of the Phantom Barrier and urges them to hurry. Seeing the bombs, Nashitania asks Fmy if this is her doing, since she's the Saint of Gunpowder. Fmy says she knows nothing about it. The group is then attacked by monsters trying to slow them down. The princess orders Goldoff to take them out. Though he defeats several, he ends up surrounded. He decides to fight seriously, and the rest of the group joins in to quickly eliminate the enemies. But with so many, Nashitania tells Adlet to go ahead to the temple while they handle the monsters. Adlet sprints toward the temple. When he arrives, he finds it intact, which strikes him as odd. Circling around, he finds a wounded woman who urges him to hurry inside because time is running out. Adlet follows her advice, but when he tries to open the doors, they're locked. He uses his bombs to blow them open, but as he steps inside, temple guards appear. After defeating them, he realizes the wounded woman was actually a monster in disguise, now fleeing into the forest. As he watches her escape, a strange fog suddenly surrounds him. Entering the temple, he spots the altar from which the barrier is activated, but it's already active. He wonders who could have triggered it. At that moment, Nashitania arrives with the other heroes, demanding to know why he activated the barrier. Adlet insists he didn't, but whoever did is no longer there. Goldoff suggests deactivating it, but when they try, the fog doesn't disappear. Adlet asks for a sword and says he once saw the last Saint of Salt, Manyakam, deactivate a similar barrier. But when they try the same method, it doesn't work. Nashitania worries that they might not be able to get out. Overcome by frustration, she tries to break the barrier, but that fails too. Losing her composure, she vows to conquer it by force, until Fmy stops her, telling her she's wasting her energy. The princess apologizes to the group. Suddenly, a mysterious young girl approaches, asking why there's so much noise. She's surprised to see Goldoff and the princess, but when she notices Adlet, she asks who he is. Adlet, equally curious, asks who she is. The girl replies that she's Chamo Rosso, the Saint of Swamps. Hearing this, Adlet introduces himself as the strongest man in the world. Chamo, amused, asks if he means her. He walks up to her and says he knows she's very strong, maybe the strongest in history after the Saint of the Flower, but she's wrong, because he is the strongest in the world. Chamo says he must be an idiot, which surprises Adlet. She then declares that now they need to kill Fmy. Before she can act, Nashitania stops her, and Adlet explains that Fmy is one of them. Chamo is surprised to hear this, since she knows Fmy is the hero killer. At that moment, they're interrupted by Mora Chester, who scolds Chamo for being so self-centered when she sees Fmy on the defensive. Once things calm down, Mora says she has a feeling that there's one person too many among them. She then introduces Hans Humpty, another member of the Six Braves, shocking everyone. Sensing the tension, Adlet demands that everyone show their marks. When they do, he confirms all of them are genuine. Mora explains that the Saint of the Flower divided her power into 6 parts to be given to each hero. That's why there have never been fewer than 6 Braves, and certainly never 7. It's impossible. The group considers various possibilities for why the goddess might have changed her mind, but Mora insists that can't happen. Hans concludes that the answer is obvious. One of them is an imposter. This revelation shocks the group. After thinking it over, Adlet agrees that it's the most logical conclusion. There's an enemy among them. Deeply concerned, Adlet tells the others there must be some way the imposter activated the barrier. Suddenly, he suggests that maybe they dug a tunnel into the chamber, lifted the paving stones, and activated the barrier from below. When he forced the door open, the imposter could have escaped through the tunnel and covered it up afterward. Hearing this, Hans points out that would mean the culprit had to be extremely fast. Adlet suggests it could have been a saint, but Mora replies there's no one capable of doing that. She explains that the seal affects the entire building, and it was constructed so that any damage would be impossible to hide. If someone broke through a wall, roof, or floor, the seal would be permanently destroyed. Even so, Adlet insists the door was opened after he entered, but Mora says that's impossible. The mantras on the armor ensure they attack the first person who enters illegitimately. Therefore, if someone had entered before him, the armor wouldn't have attacked him at all. A bit unsettled, Adlet suggests maybe it was a saint who could enter in another way, but Mora answers that such saints wouldn't be able to restore the seal. He then speculates it could be a saint raised by monsters, like Fmy. Fmy interjects, saying there are no others like her. A normal monster can't bear a human child. The creation of someone like her mother took a long time, which is why she's unique. The heroes prepare to finish Adlet off, but Mora stops them, saying it's too soon to judge him. Nashatania says she doesn't believe he's the enemy, but Hans reminds her that no one else arrived at the temple before Adlet. If that's true, he says, then he can't understand how the barrier was activated, which is why he advises Adlet to prove his innocence. Fmy interrupts, noting that everyone is changing positions very quickly. Concerned, the princess asks Fmy if she doesn't want to help him, but Fmy says she has no interest in saving Adlet, even if he did protect her earlier. Adlet offers another theory. The culprit opened the door, went inside, removed the door entirely, and then created another to reseal the temple. This way, they could hide inside, activate the barrier, and escape when he forced his way in. Goldoff asks if he's implying that the Saint of Seals is working with the demon god. Adlet says it's a possibility, but Hans laughs, reminding him that the temple was built by the previous Saint of Seals. Adlet insists that she must be the traitor, but Hans points out she died 4 years ago, making that impossible. Quickly, Adlet accuses Hans of being the 7th hero, since all he's done is lie. Mora corrects him, saying Hans hasn't lied at all. Feeling cornered, Adlet says he's been set up. Mora suggests they first hear everyone's opinion, though Adlet clearly doesn't like the idea. Hans speaks first. He believes Adlet is guilty and proposes killing him. The princess objects and asks Goldoff why he isn't even trying to defend him. Meanwhile, Chamo tells Mora she's more interested in killing Fmy, since she didn't quite understand what happened. Still, she admits she wouldn't mind torturing Adlet. Mora says that, although she agrees with Hans, it's not enough to justify killing him. Fmy abstains from giving a verdict, telling them to do whatever they want with him. Mora then turns to Goldoff for his opinion, but before he can answer, the princess tries to convince him that Adlet isn't the enemy. Suddenly, Goldoff lunges at Adlet without hesitation. Hans attacks too, forcing Adlet to use one of his bombs. Adlet grabs Fmy as a hostage and injects her with a sleeping poison, warning that the next dose will be lethal. Mora tells him he's just dug his own grave, and Hans swears he won't let him escape. Chamo offers to take him down, but Mora stops her, as her powers would also kill Fmy. Adlet insists they've never let him speak, and he asks Hans if he'll let him pass. Seeing how determined he is, Hans steps aside, and Adlet takes the chance to flee. Before he can get far, Hans slashes his back, but Adlet keeps running. The others give chase until they stop, seeing that he's scattered spikes across the ground. Elsewhere, Adlet laments that now no one will believe him as he tries to escape with Fmy in his arms. Because of his wound, he eventually collapses and tries to pull out the dagger stuck in his back. He knows the poison he gave Fmy will soon wear off. Suddenly, he starts to lose consciousness. He fights it, knowing that if he passes out, it will be the end for him. But he can't remove the dagger, and finally, he blacks out, frustrated that he couldn't prove he truly is the strongest man in the world. In the next scene, we see Adlet with Hans, telling him what happened before he arrived at the temple. Later, as they mark the area, Adlet admits he's never heard of Hans before, and asks to know more about his life. Hans replies that it's better if Adlet doesn't have that information, which surprises him. Soon after, Adlet realizes they've been walking in circles. They decide to try another method to figure out what's going on. In the end, they conclude that the barrier is indeed functioning, so they head back to the temple to report to the others. When they arrive, Nashatania greets them. Adlet says they need to deactivate the barrier, but when he sees Fmy chained up, he's immediately concerned for her. The Saint of Gunpowder tells him she doesn't need his pity. Ignoring that, Adlet asks Mora how her task went. Mora explains that the Divine Word Book doesn't say how to deactivate the barrier. She says there are only two ways. First, the person who activated it must deactivate it. Second, if that person dies, the barrier will automatically disappear. She also informs them that neither humans nor monsters can leave the area inside the barrier. The group discusses how the barrier could have been activated. After hearing Mora's explanations, Adlet concludes that someone among them must be working with the demon god. Chamo immediately declares that the culprit is Fmy and says they should kill her so the barrier disappears. Adlet stops her, reminding her that Fmy is one of the 6 braves, which annoys the little girl. Mora suggests that everyone introduce themselves, since there are still faces and names she can't match, and also tell what they've done up to that point. Adlet goes first, giving his entire life story. The others grow tired of hearing him repeat that he's the strongest man in the world, so they ask him what that means. He replies that being the strongest man in the world means being him, which makes Hans laugh and call him an idiot. Mora interrupts, so someone else can speak. The princess volunteers, and after she finishes, Mora calls on Goldoff. Adlet thinks it's impossible for someone so loyal to betray the princess. Goldoff confirms both Adlet's and Nashatania's accounts while dragging Fmy along. Mora says she never imagined the heroes would fight each other. She introduces herself as the leader of the temple that oversees the saints and says she knows the faces and abilities of 78 of them. Adlet asks if she knew Fmy, but Mora says no, and that maybe Fmy is a new saint, something that hasn't happened in 100 years. She explains that she replaced the previous leader, Ryura, 10 years ago, and hasn't had problems since. Mora says she was hiding at the meeting point when Hans arrived. Adlet asks how someone of her rank didn't know about the barrier. She says she'd heard of it but didn't know the details and regrets not investigating further. She then asks Chamo to introduce herself. The girl brags about how she became famous for her strength. Adlet thinks that if she's the 7th hero, they're in trouble. He interrupts her when she says she already knew Fmy, and Chamo admits she tried to defeat her, but failed. Mora cuts in to let Hans speak. Adlet considers him the most suspicious, especially when Hans admits he's an assassin. Nashatania questions how someone like that could be chosen as a hero, but Hans says the only requirement is the ability to defeat the demon god. He adds that the world isn't fair, and he's even worked for high-ranking officials in his own government. When chosen, he was near the land of the fiends. After being selected, he negotiated with his king for payment to defeat the demon god, hid the money, and headed for the land of the fiends, where he met Mora. Goldoff asks if the king told him about the barrier. Hans says yes, but he didn't think it was important. Adlet finds it strange he met Mora without knowing about the phantom barrier. Mora then asks Fmy to introduce herself. Fmy refuses. Mora warns that staying silent will only hurt her case. Fmy says nothing could be worse than her current situation, then asks Mora to remove her eye patch and lift her headpiece. Everyone is shocked to see she has a horn. She reveals she's the daughter of a monster and a human. She explains that 20 years ago, monsters entered the human world to create a pawn to fight the Braves, and that pawn is her. Her father was human, but she never met him. She knows he died after impregnating her mother, a monster who raised her among her kind. Her mother and allies brought many humans into the land of the fiends to build the temple of the goddess of gunpowder, which is how she gained her powers. Following orders, she left the land of the fiends to aid in the demon god's resurrection. She admits she always considered herself a loyal monster. Mora asks why she now wants to defeat the demon god, but Fmy refuses to answer. Adlet steps in, reminding them that she said only a human can activate the barrier, which means it's impossible for Fmy to have done it. Hans disagrees, explaining that what repels monsters is the pillar of the Saint of Salt, but Fmy was able to enter, proving she can do things impossible for both sides. Fmy insists she didn't activate the barrier and suggests maybe Mora isn't telling the whole truth, making her another suspect. Adlet thinks he needs to be careful not to draw suspicion and that his priority is to clear Fremmy's name. Chamo, hearing Fmy has finished speaking, insists again on killing her. Adlet tries to stop her, but Chamo approaches and says she'll torture her, even if it's her first time. Hans steps in, saying he doesn't believe Fmy is the imposter. If she were, she'd have already killed Adlet to avoid this situation. He adds that the imposter would have done everything possible to stop all 7 heroes from gathering. Fmy confirms she's had many chances to kill Adlet, since he's walked ahead of her with his back turned for long stretches of time. The others ask Adlet how he could walk like that without worrying. With some doubts cleared, Mora asks what they should do next. Suddenly, Nashitania feels unwell, and they ask her to sit and rest. Mora tells Adlet to explain what happened when the barrier was activated. He recounts the incident with the woman who turned out to be a monster. Chamo interrupts to say she was the one who killed it. Adlet continues, explaining that he used explosives to open the door. Mora says she had the key and regrets that Lauren didn't foresee something like this. Adlet says that after entering he fought the guards and believes that's when someone activated the barrier. But when he went inside, there was no sign of the culprit. Hans, confused, asks if Adlet isn't remembering wrong and warns it's his last chance to tell the truth. He asks if the sword was already in the pedestal when Adlet entered. Adlet says yes. Hans explains that, as an assassin, he knows the Saint of Seals made special doors. Some that never open, some that close forever, and some that drop bars when opened. That's why he finds it strange the temple door is so solid, and once opened, doesn't close again. This makes Adlet's story suspicious, since according to him, the door was closed, and the barrier was activated soon after he forced it open. Hans concludes there's no way anyone entered before him, making Adlet the prime suspect. That night, Mora tells the others to stop searching because it's too dangerous to continue. Hans replies that night is his specialty, that they won't catch him, and that he wants to keep Fmy from being killed. Mora stares at him and asks to see his mark. When he shows it, she confirms Fmy is still alive, meaning Adlet knows her value as a hostage. Hans doesn't understand how she knows that, so Mora explains that when a hero dies, the flower on their mark loses a petal. She then tells him to return to the temple, and he agrees without protest. Meanwhile, the others wait anxiously. Chamo says she lost sight of Adlet because he's too fast. Mora complains, recalling the same happened to them, and tells everyone to be cautious when searching for him in the morning. Elsewhere, unconscious, Adlet recalls his childhood training with his friend Raynor. After being easily defeated, Raynor told him to get stronger to help their squad. Later, Adlet complains that Raynor always wants him to train more for the squad. His sister says Raynor is a good boy and that Adlet could use some sword training. Adlet replies he'd rather go mushroom hunting in the forest because he enjoys cooking with her. The scene shifts to show him in rough shape, approaching the man who would become his master to ask for training. Atro refuses, saying if Adlet wants to be strong, he should join the knights or the mercenaries. Adlet insists they won't make him the strongest in the world and he needs to be that strong to defeat the monsters. Seeing his determination, Atro asks why he wants to be strong. Adlet says he wants to take back what was stolen from him, but Atro tells him what's lost can't be recovered. He advises him to forget it and live his life. This angers Adlet. He doesn't understand why he survived, if not to become the strongest. Seeing him cry, Atro punches him, forcing him to smile, saying if he wants to be strong, he has to smile even in hard times. Barely able to breathe, Adlet tries to smile, but it's not enough, and Atro keeps hitting him. Suddenly, Adlet wakes up and finds that Fmy has treated his wounds, surprising him. She advises him to rest and recover his mobility. He asks why she saved him. Fmy says she's 99% sure he's the 7th, though she's not completely certain. Adlet jokes that he thought she felt sorry for him, then insists he's a true hero who only came to face the demon god. She says she still doesn't trust him. Later, Adlet notices Fmy is cold and tries to start a fire, but fails. She easily lights one using her power. He asks why she even needs a weapon if she's that powerful. Fmy says he wouldn't understand, then explains the cold is because of the temple. Adlet is surprised, thinking about how the salt barrier works. She says she could only enter the temple because of her human half, but she suffered greatly because of her monster side. Seeing pity in his eyes, she tells him to keep it because she doesn't want it. She says she's crossed far stronger barriers to kill warriors. Adlet respects her wish and changes the subject, asking if she's sure the monsters didn't activate the barrier. She says yes, and that the monster who tricked him must have been outside the pillars surrounding the temple. He admits he has no idea how anyone could have entered first, and Fmy says that's because he's the one who did it. Adlet asks if she's sure Hans told the truth, and she says that while she doesn't know much, she thinks he's right. She adds that Mora was with him, so she thinks no one entered before him. Resigned, Adlet suggests maybe Hans or Mora are the culprits, but Fmy says it doesn't matter until he proves his innocence. Adlet proposes going over everything they've been through, starting by ruling out certain people as the traitor. He eliminates Nashatania, Goldoff, and Fmy since they were together at the time. However, Mora and Hans were headed to the temple, so Fmy suggests maybe Chama was involved. Adlet says he doesn't know because she never said where she came from and thinks her power could have helped her enter. Fmy disagrees, saying her power is too destructive, and if she opened a hole in the ground, she couldn't close it again. Adlet concludes they're actually facing at least two enemies, one who joined them at the temple and another who entered first to activate the barrier. He believes the monsters bombarded the temple to draw them in and then attacked to separate one member from the group. Fmy says if that's true, she doesn't understand why they'd need a seventh hero, because if all they wanted was to trap them, there was no need to add another member. Adlet calls her an idiot, saying without the seventh person, they couldn't frame him. That's why he's convinced they've always wanted to accuse and kill the strongest man in the world. He tells Fmy to forget about the seventh and focus on finding the eighth, the one who activated the barrier. She asks if he can find them alone, and after thinking, Adlet admits he'll need her help. Fmy refuses, since she still suspects him, which makes him start smiling. She questions it, and he recalls how Atro taught him to laugh in the face of despair. Excited, he promises that at dawn, he'll prove his innocence. With a wide smile, he says that even if he doesn't know how yet, he'll keep smiling because everything's over once you stop. Fmy then asks him why he wants to be one of the 6 braves. When Adlet hears her words, he realizes Fmy is interested in him, and this might be the first time she's ever shown interest in anyone. Curious, he asks why. She replies that it's because he's just average, a normal man with an unusual collection of weapons. Adlet asks if that means she thinks he's weak, but Fmy clarifies that's not it. She just finds it strange that someone so normal could have become so strong. A little embarrassed, Adlet says he owes it all to his master, a man who was a bit eccentric and obsessed with monsters. This man chose to live in the mountains, creating new weapons and clever ways to use them against enemies. He trained Adlet harshly, day after day, until he collapsed from exhaustion and forced him to study as if chained to a desk. He even taught him how to make all sorts of weapons. Hearing this, Fmy says his description reminds her of Atro Spiker, who was also on her list though, because of his age, he wasn't a priority. She adds that rumors said none of his students could withstand his strictness, and all of them fled. Adlet says that's wrong. He never ran away because he was determined to become a hero. He then tells her that when he was a boy, a monster appeared in his village while he was playing with his friend Rainer. As they argued about whether to confront it, the monster approached and told them it had come to speak with the adults. That night, Adlet couldn't sleep, waiting for the next day. In the morning, the village elder announced they would be taken to the land of the fiends to live under the demon god's protection, since the 6 braves stood no chance of winning. This meant the human world was finished. Adlet remembers the villagers were angry at the decision, believing they could still defeat the demon god, but this only made it easier for them to follow the monster's orders, which included ripping out the hearts of any who opposed them as proof of loyalty. Fmy recognizes the story and asks for a description of the monster. After hearing it, she tells him it was one of the 3 who command all the others, and the one who came up with the idea of creating a half-breed, forcing her mother to give birth to her. Shocked, Adlet continues. That day, his friend died protecting him, and his sister gave her life so he could be the only one to escape. Fmy, upset, says that was exactly the monster's plan. Adlet explains that no one blamed the villagers. His friend asked him not to hate them, and his sister promised they'd live together in peace one day. Atro told him that those sacrifices were what made him strong, and, believing in those words, he worked to become stronger. Fmy admits she envies him, because she has nothing to believe in. The monster who bore and raised her gave her the power of the Saint of Gunpowder, and a small amount of happiness, only to abandon her. She says she always loved everyone, believing her love would be returned. But when she grew up, she gained her powers and killed many people without hesitation, following her mother's orders. Being a half-breed, she believed she had to work harder than anyone for the demon god until she faced Chamo. She couldn't land a single hit, fell for Shamo's taunts, and in a careless moment revealed her name. Barely alive, she escaped. Yet when she returned, her mother tried to kill her for becoming useless to the monsters she once thought were her friends. Fmy says she regrets running away because she can't forgive them for trying to kill her. She admits that if she had been nothing but a puppet, she wouldn't have suffered so much from the betrayal, and that she would have preferred being raised as a slave from the start. She grows furious at the thought that her mother only pretended to love her and vows to destroy everything she worked for, starting with the demon god, to make her regret it and see the result of her betrayal. Adlet tries to encourage her, but she asks why he trusts her words. She thinks that if he truly is who he says he is and not the seventh, he should doubt her. Otherwise, he'll become suspicious himself. He replies that now he understands why he can't abandon her and why he's chosen to tell her his past, because they share the pain of betrayal and losing their homes. And more than that, just like him, she lives for revenge. Adlet says he trusts her because he doesn't want to see her as an enemy. Fmy responds that they're very different. He has something to believe in. She then says she's going back to the temple, since he's still the most suspicious one. Before leaving, she gives him one of her bombs, one that makes no light or sound, but whose detonation only she can detect. Adlet takes it, watching her walk away, and promises to protect her and the rest of the Braves. In the next scene, Fmy arrives at the temple and lies about what happened with Adlet, saying he escaped. Mora tells her to rest and share the details in the morning. Meanwhile, Adlet thinks that he didn't become strong out of revenge or hatred, but to make sure he never loses anyone again. Fmy, for her part, thinks that if he truly wants to protect everyone, he'll end up dying. The next day, Fmy tells the other Braves what happened and also shares her own story. Shamo still suspects her, but Mora interrupts to say that Fmy is indeed a true hero. Hans, however, questions whether it's really wise to treat her as an ally. He says they can't be sure she truly fought Adlet, who was injured by the dagger Hans himself threw. Fmy replies that he didn't hit any vital organs and criticizes him for not being as skilled as he claims. Hans reminds her that Adlet always defended her, even stopping others from torturing her. He teases that maybe she's fallen in love with him, which irritates Fmy, who calls him annoying. Mora demands silence, but admits she's curious about Fremmy's story and asks how she felt when she discovered Adlet was the seventh. Fmy says she expected it because he had always tried to gain her trust, and once she learned the truth, everything made sense. Later, Goldoff points out that catching Adlet is the priority and asks how they'll do it. Hans says Adlet left most of his weapons behind, meaning he can't fight, so he'll probably try to get them back. The best option, he says, is to wait for him. Fmy suggests making a plan if they're going to wait, but Goldoff prefers to go search for him. Mora decides they'll split into pairs and begins assigning groups. She orders Hans and Shamo to stay at the temple to wait for Adlet, while the rest go looking for him. Shamo protests because she doesn't like waiting. Mora changes the arrangement and asks Fmy to stay with Hans instead, but Shamo protests again, saying she just wants to go out and play. Thanks to Hans, the leader lets Shamo go, though she warns her not to get lost in the forest. The search groups split up and head out in different directions. In another scene, the princess asks Goldoff if he trusts her. When he says yes, she asks if he'd accept her ideas without complaint. Goldoff asks what she means, and she tells him she's sure Adlet isn't the seventh, so she'll do whatever she can to prove it. She believes he fell into a trap and hopes she'll be the one to help him. Goldoff says he won't allow it, but Nashatania insists on looking for proof that will bring them closer to the truth. Finally, she admits she suspects Hans, leaving Goldoff speechless. Meanwhile, Adlet observes Fmy and Mora from a distance and realizes the group has split into pairs. This means someone is now alone with the seventh. Worried that person might be killed and he'll be blamed, he rushes to the temple, hoping to find the culprit and recover his weapons. When he arrives, he runs into Hans, who was already waiting for him. Adlet asks him again if he's the culprit, but Hans ignores the question. So Adlet pretends they're about to fight to buy time and think of a way to escape. The fight begins. Adlet tries to escape with a smoke bomb, but Hans easily counters it, saying he won't fall for the same trick twice. The two engage in an intense duel, showing their impressive skills, but, in the end, Hans emerges as the victor. Hans tells Adlet it was a good plan to pretend to be one of the 6 Braves, but thanks to him, it didn't work. Adlet tries to convince him he's not the imposter, but Hans says that won't work on him. Hans demands he confess who he's working for, but Adlet insists he can't because he's not the imposter. Hans insists he is, and begins listing possible motives for such a scheme. Adlet denies them all, saying he has no family, no lover, and repeating that he's not the imposter. Suddenly, just as Hans is about to kill him, Adlet detonates a smoke grenade to escape, but he's also blinded by the blast, giving Hans time to recover. Adlet is shocked that Hans can attack with such precision, even without being able to see, forcing him to work twice as hard to avoid being hit. Finally, cornered, Adlet sets aside all his weapons and challenges Hans to attack. To Hans's surprise, he says he doesn't need secret weapons to fight because his own strength is enough. Hans hesitates, sensing Adlet is plotting something. Meanwhile, Adlet thinks that defeating Hans wouldn't be a real victory. What he needs is to clear his name and uncover the seventh. He notices Hans is uneasy, trying to guess what trick he's hiding, and uses that moment to fire his sword mechanism and disarm him. He intentionally misses, hoping Hans will understand that he doesn't want to kill him because he's not the imposter. When Hans doesn't get it, Adlet explains, if he were the seventh, there'd be no reason to hold back, and this would have been the perfect moment to finish him. Even completely unarmed, Hans still doesn't believe him, but Adlet assures him he could never kill a comrade. He knows he's making a big gamble trusting Hans not to be the seventh because, if he's wrong, it's over for him. Finally, Hans relents and says he now considers Adlet a real hero. He admits it was smart to stay, otherwise Adlet might have convinced the rest. Then, with a serious look, he tells Adlet that he's the seventh. Adlet rushes for his weapons, but Hans is faster and slashes his neck, only for Adlet to realize he's still alive. Hans reveals it was just an illusion, and that he wanted to see Adlet's true face in the moment of death. He explains that humans lie with words, and even with their actions, but their expressions in the face of death never lie. That's why he pushed Adlet to the brink, to see his honest reaction. If he'd been the imposter, he wouldn't have worn that look of confusion when Hans claimed to be the seventh. Adlet is stunned, realizing Hans has seen enough people die to know. In the next scene, Adlet picks up his weapons and Hans steps forward to shake his hand. They're allies now. Elsewhere, Fmy meets with Mora, who tries to get information about Adlet's whereabouts. Having lost his trail, Mora doesn't understand what he's after and thinks his plan was too meticulous to end here. Fmy suggests they keep searching, but Mora stops her because she wants to talk. When she tries to interrogate her, Fmy gets annoyed and asks why they don't suspect Chamo or Hans instead. Mora says she doesn't suspect Fmy because she considers her a true hero. Fmy agrees to answer her questions, but warns she doesn't know much. After explaining how monsters are organized, Mora asks what she knows about humans allied with them. Fmy says she's only heard rumors about a village whose inhabitants were taken, but there was no proof, and the Banten temple couldn't act. Seeing Mora blame herself, Fmy tells her it's not her fault. Mora thanks her for her kindness and admits the only good thing Adlet did was bring her into the group. Fmy tells her not to treat her like a child and suggests they resume the search. Before leaving, Mora says she knows how Fmy feels about Adlet, since he's the only one who defended her, but warns her not to show mercy if they find him. Fmy calmly replies that she actually despises him. Meanwhile, Goldoff and the princess reach the end of the road to the land of the fiends, the meeting point for the Braves. They find the remains of a campfire, and Nashatania says this confirms Mora's and Hans's story. When she laments not finding any clues, Goldoff reminds her Adlet is the enemy. She says that if he doesn't trust her, he should go on his own, but then apologizes for overreacting. Goldoff asks why she trusts Adlet more than someone who's always served her. She tells him to be quiet, reminding him they're in a battle to save the world and that a comrade's life is at stake. She adds that she's long known how he feels about her, but this isn't the time to talk about it. She says she doesn't have time for his jealousy, and he apologizes for losing his composure. Elsewhere, Adlet checks his weapons for anything that might help him find clues. Hans searches the upper areas of the temple for an entrance, but finds nothing, remarking that it still looks like someone got in before Adlet, even though the seal should be unbreakable. Adlet insists it was done by a saint, and Hans reminds him Mora said that was impossible. Adlet suggests maybe she doesn't know of the ability, or that saints haven't revealed all their powers. He then asks Hans who would be the next suspect if he were killed. Hans says Fmy, confirming Adlet's suspicions, though he regrets it. Later, Adlet sprays the altar looking for clues, but they hear someone approaching and hide. It turns out to be a false alarm, but Hans warns someone might return soon. He asks Adlet how the barrier is activated, and Adlet realizes that only a few people know. He says he needs to ask Chamo something and asks where to find her. Then he changes his mind and decides Hans should go instead. Just then, Adlet spots something strange near the temple entrance and goes to investigate. Outside, they run into Chamo, who asks Hans why he's walking with the imposter. Hans says Adlet isn't the enemy, but Chamo says she doesn't believe him, though she doesn't care how he figured it out. Adlet tries to use the moment to ask her something that could help identify the seventh. Chamo, bored with games, says she'll just kill him, then Fmy, then Hans, and if they're not the imposter, she'll kill the princess and Goldoff because she's sure Mora isn't it. She then unleashes her power, shocking both men. Adlet is stunned to see she keeps monsters inside her. She explains she found them in her swamp, where she stores everything she eats. Seeing she's serious, Hans suggests they run. They sprint for a while, but when it's clear they can't escape, they decide to fight her monsters, only to find they regenerate instantly. Adlet realizes why Fmy ran from her before and scolds Chamo for attacking Hans too. She says she doesn't care, since there's no proof he's not the imposter, and tells Hans to kill Adlet so she won't have to. Hans reassures Adlet he won't. Adlet tells him that if they're cornered, he should escape alone, but Hans refuses and prepares to fight as the monsters surround them. Showing off his incredible agility, Hans starts cutting down Chamo's monsters. Seeing his determination, Adlet decides to do the same, but neither of them can make any real progress. Adlet suggests they go straight for Chamo at the same time, but they can't get close because her monsters protect her perfectly. Chamo watches their struggle and mocks them, saying everyone tries the same tactic and it never works. Adlet changes tactics and asks Hans to cover him. Hans snaps back, telling him to quit slacking off because he's busy with his own problems. Adlet insists he only needs a moment to think of a plan. They regroup, and Hans says he can hold off the attacks for 60 seconds. Adlet tells him that when the time's up, he should go straight for Chamo, no matter how, and he'll cover him. While Hans fights off the monsters, Adlet quickly works through his plan. He decides to use poison, and then tries setting them on fire to see if that works. Hans calls out that the 60 seconds are up. Adlet plays his flute, luring the monsters in and buying time, which allows him to set Hans up in a favorable position. Seeing this, Chamo calls them idiots and spits out another monster. Adlet tells Hans not to dodge it, but to block it instead, which gives them the opening they need to land a hit on Chamo. That strike gives Hans the chance to take her down. Chamo recalls her monsters back into herself as she's restrained. The two bring her back to the temple, telling her they don't think she's the seventh hero. Adlet then asks her if she knew about the barrier before joining them for the first time. Chamo says no, and that answer clears up some of his doubts. Elsewhere, Fmy and Mora return to the temple after hearing the sounds of Chamo's fight. Mora grows concerned when the noise stops, but Fmy reassures her that no one can beat Chamo. Meanwhile, Adlet and Hans leave Chamo at the temple and head into the forest. Along the way, Hans tells Adlet that Fmy is still his main suspect. Adlet disagrees, saying she isn't the imposter, but Hans warns him that getting close to her is dangerous. He explains that Fmy lives in darkness, loves and trusts no one, and sees everyone around her as either an enemy or someone who will become one. Adlet stares at him, and Hans adds that he also lives in the dark, but Fremmy's darkness is much deeper. Because of Adlet's values of camaraderie and trust, Hans says they're practically different species. Adlet agrees, but says he still wants to talk to her. He leaves Chamo in Hans's care and hands him a tool he hopes will help find proof. Then, Adlet detonates the bomb Fmy had given him, and she senses the signal. While waiting, she wonders if she really hates him because she'd thought they were starting to understand each other. Then she realizes he's right in front of her, but with his weapon ready. At the temple, Mora scolds Hans for letting Adlet escape. Hans asks her to go easy on him and says he thinks he can prove Adlet's innocence because Adlet has figured out the Seventh's plan. This surprises Mora. Adlet tells Fmy he's discovered part of the Seventh's trap. He says they were wrong to think the barrier was activated just before he opened the door, because when he entered the temple, the barrier was still inactive. When she doesn't believe him, he reminds her they know how to activate it, and asks if she remembers who taught them. Since she doesn't answer, he says it himself, Lauren. That made him wonder if Lauren was working for the Seventh, because none of them knew about the barrier until he told them. Goldoff and Nashitania learned about it a day before. Mora already knew because Lauren had shown her how to activate it. Hans didn't know because he never met Lauren, and Chamo learned about it only after joining the group. In short, they all learned to activate the barrier from Lauren, so if he lied, there'd be no way to know. Fmy listens closely and tells him to go on. Adlet explains that the enemy used Lauren and the monsters to lure them to the temple, waiting for them to arrive before triggering the mist, making them think someone had activated the barrier and escaped afterward. But the barrier hadn't been activated yet. There was only mist, even though the sword was already on the altar. So the Seventh took advantage of everyone's desire to deactivate the barrier to actually activate it. Then all they had to do was claim the temple had been sealed until Adlet arrived, making him the scapegoat. Fmy points out that Hans was the one who accused him and directly asks if Hans is the Seventh. Meanwhile, the princess asks Goldoff if he remembers how Hans introduced himself. When he says yes, she points out something strange about when Hans and Mora entered the temple. Though it was only once, Hans called her princess. meaning he always knew her identity, but later pretended otherwise. She doesn't know why, and Goldoff is shocked. Elsewhere, Hans tells Mora what Adlet discovered about the Seventh's plan. She says it must be someone very clever, and after freeing Chamo, reminds Hans that he was the one who first accused Adlet. Adlet tells Fmy he'd thought about revealing what he knew about the closed room trick, but since Hans spoke first, he decided to let him finish. She asks if he trusts Hans, and Adlet says yes, because when they fought and Hans held his life in his hands, he chose to trust his word. He says that's not the important part. The important thing is they now know someone waited for him to enter the temple before activating the mist. So his goal is to catch the culprit and clear his name. Fmy says it's a good idea, but warns he's made a fatal mistake in underestimating the saints. She explains that even though they use the powers of the gods, those powers have limits and vary from saint to saint. Adlet insists there must be one who can control mist, and she reveals it could be the saint who formed the barrier, Uspa, the saint of mist. Fmy explains that Uspa could have covered the forest in 15 minutes, but might have spent years building up the mist god's power in this place to release it instantly. If she'd known Uspa could do that, she says, Uspa would have been at the top of her target list. Then, tossing a bomb, she reveals a large number of pillars buried in the forest. These posts contain the Phantom Barrier's power, and thanks to them, the mist appeared instantly. Adlet wonders if maybe another mist barrier was made, but Fmy says only one type of barrier can be installed in a place. If there are two, one will be disabled. That's why she believes creating so much mist at once is impossible without a barrier, but since there was already one there to produce mist, she thinks his theory is wrong. Meanwhile, Hans tries to convince Mora that Adlet's theory is still the most plausible, but she refuses to listen and declares she's going after Adlet. Hans threatens her to make her stop. He says he's certain of Adlet's innocence and asks why she spared everyone when she could have killed them. Mora says it's for the same reason she appeared before them in the first place. She just wanted to set a trap and play with their hearts. That way, they'd all turn on each other. She scolds him for being fooled so easily. The scene shifts back to Fmy, who tells Adlet he's in checkmate because his theory is ruined. Even if he's not the imposter, he has no chance of surviving. Adlet laments not having her help and considers going to the princess. But Fmy catches on and accuses him of always relying on others and threatens to kill him. Adlet smiles, telling her he's used to being insulted and mocked. He reminds her that, as he was taught, everything ends when you stop smiling, so he won't give up. Then he points out that if she kills him, she'll be the next suspect. As long as he's alive, no one will doubt Fmy, which is why he asks her to trust his word. She says that's impossible because she doesn't understand the way he thinks. She doesn't understand why he smiles, why he won't give up even at death's door, or why he protects her. Finally, she says Mora has probably reached the temple by now and may have convinced Hans to hunt him down. Even so, she wants Adlet to stay with her so she can get to know him better. Meanwhile, the princess tells Goldoff that during her journey with Adlet, she felt many things. She says she shouldn't compare him to the other Braves because there's something different about him, though she doesn't know what yet. She then asks Goldoff to check his mark to see if Adlet is still alive. A bit embarrassed, Goldoff agrees and tells her that no one has died. In the next scene, Adlet is caught off guard when Fmy says she's trying to trust him. He tries to step closer, but she raises her weapon, threatening to kill him if he dares lie to her. He asks her to stop, telling her he never thought of them as enemies and that he's always protected her with no hidden agenda. Fmy doesn't believe a word and warns him not to try deceiving her. Hearing this, Adlet decides to tell her that there was a time when he tried to turn himself into nothing more than a weapon of war because he thought that way he could throw away his heart and focus solely on killing the monsters that took everything from him. He thought it was the only way to become the world's strongest warrior. But, with a bit of embarrassment, he admits it didn't work, because you can't throw away your heart. Fmy replies that he's wrong, explaining she managed to do it because it was necessary for her revenge. Adlet tells her that's impossible, because the very desire to throw away one's heart comes from that same heart. That's why she'll never truly abandon everything to become stronger. And besides, love isn't something you can just give up. Surprised, Fmy listens as he confesses that for the entire time they've been together, he's been in love with her. He only just realized it, but knows his feelings haven't changed since the first time he saw her. He tells her that when he found out she was the hero killer, he decided that if no one else trusted her, he would. If no one would defend her, he'd be the one person who did. He says it was the same when the imposter appeared. Instead of searching for them, he focused on protecting her, because he never doubted her innocence. She asks what it is he likes about her, and he says he doesn't know, but it hurts him every time she's in pain. It's a pain that even the world's strongest man can't bear. Finally, Fmy asks where he plans to live after killing the demon god, because she can't return to the monsters and has no place among humans. The best option, she says, would be to die in battle. Adlet tells her that when she gets her revenge, she should go on living. She says that's impossible because she's the daughter of a monster and the hero killer. But Adlet promises he'll make sure she has a home because he's the world's strongest man. Hearing that, Fmy says she understands now, but when he tries to approach her, she shoots him. To his surprise, she says she's now convinced they're enemies. Meanwhile, the rest of the Braves hear the gunfire and quickly try to locate the fight. Before leaving, Mora orders Chamo to keep an eye on Hans and not to attack unless he does something. Hans complains, knowing Chamo is dangerous, but Mora ignores him and calls on the power of the mountain god. Using the echoes of the mountain technique, she sends word to the others that Hans has been defeated and is gravely wounded, and that Adlet, after all, is the seventh. Hearing Mora's lie, Hans is furious, especially since she's ordered Adlet's death. But Chamo says she didn't listen, and at most, she'll just leave him half dead. Mora warns her not to try it. She just wants him watched. Meanwhile, Fmy chases Adlet, who shows her his Brave's mark to prove Hans is still alive. She replies that Mora never said he was dead, and tells him she'll never believe him again. Elsewhere, the princess, shaken by Mora's message, apologizes to Hans for doubting him. Goldoff suggests they leave, but suddenly she starts acting strangely. After calming down, she says it's the first time she's ever felt real anger. She regrets trusting Adlet, and, unleashing her power, even scares Goldoff. Laughing, she asks how he'd feel if she lost control and killed Adlet. Back with Fmy, she fires a light signal into the sky so the others can find them. Adlet tells her to go back to the temple so he can expose Mora's lies. Fmy says it doesn't matter because it won't change the fact that he's still the imposter. She continues chasing him, throwing explosives to stop him. Adlet tries to convince her to believe him, which catches her off guard. She tells him that all liars say the same thing when they try to win her over with sweet words, and she won't fall for it again. No one can protect her, so she has to survive on her own until she dies. As she readies her next attack, she says it's better to trust no one than to trust and be betrayed. Even so, Adlet keeps moving closer despite her continued attacks, because he knows that even though Fmy has decided to trust no one, deep down, she still wants someone to trust. Suddenly, Mora appears, telling Fmy to cover her while she finishes off Adlet. The protagonist tries to run, thinking it's all over. Convinced he can't do anything more for Fmy, he uses his gear to hold Mora back for a moment. When he finally gets Fmy to look at him, he stops moving, ready to take Mora's strike head-on. But just before she hits him, Fmy steps in, saying Adlet has surrendered. She understands his decision and warns him he won't make it out alive. Adlet asks if Hans is alive. She confirms it and says Hans was the one who wounded him. They say they'll take him in to force a confession about who sent him. Adlet refuses and instead vows to prove Fremy's innocence, explaining that the imposter's plan relied on one of the 7 marked Braves activating the barrier. With no time to waste, he says he's going straight to the evidence. Mora tells him to shut up, calling him the imposter, but he pulls out a drug his master made and asks Fmy for a bullet. He explains the drug is used to detect traces of monsters, turning red when it reacts with their fluids. He says he saw the monster part of Fmy react to it, but when he sprayed it on the activation altar, there was no reaction. Adlet says Hans also witnessed that Fmy is innocent. Then he warns Mora that if she's the 7th, her plan is ruined because after killing him, she likely planned to blame and eliminate Fmy too. Mora says it's impressive that he almost made her think he was a real hero, but now she'll kill him before he fools anyone else. Adlet tells Fmy that when he dies, she should go straight to Hans. But before Mora can strike, Fmy shoots her. Fmy tells Adlet she hated him because she was starting to trust him, and the more they talk, the more she hates him, because he trusts her when she swore never to trust anyone again. Crying, she creates a distraction so they can both escape from Mora, but suddenly, Nashitania arrives with Goldoff and blocks their way. The princess tells Adlet it was fun being with him, but now she has to kill him. Fmy, hearing the princess's words, tells her that Hans is fine and that Adlet is not her enemy, so she shouldn't listen to Mora's lies. But Mora, however, doubles down, insisting Hans is injured and that Adlet is their enemy. Nashitania then turns to Adlet, telling him she's still waiting for him to repent before he dies. Hearing this, Fmy tells Adlet to run, warning him that the princess has gone insane. He says he's heading to the temple, but suddenly Nashitania, tired of waiting, attacks spurred on by Mora's words. Fmy immediately jumps in to protect Adlet, completely destroying the princess's strike. But Nashitania doesn't give up and changes tactics, launching another attack that also fails. Goldoff then decides to step in, going for Fmy, but she senses him in time. Even so, Goldoff lunges again, forcing Adlet to intervene to protect her. Seeing how well the two of them fight together, Mora tells the princess she'll handle Fmy while the others deal with Adlet. But Fmy throws several bombs, forcing them to back off for a moment. She tells Adlet she'll hold off Goldoff and Mora so he can escape. But remembering his promise, Adlet says he'll protect her until the very end because he's the world's strongest man. A moment later, he tries to head for the temple, but the princess pursues him. Meanwhile, Goldoff and Mora attack Fmy, doubting she can take them both. Eventually, Mora lands a clean hit, defeating the Saint of Gunpowder. Before falling, Fmy wishes for Adlet to escape. Adlet's only goal now is to reach the temple and show the princess that Hans is fine. But when he arrives, neither Hans nor Chamo are there. He checks his mark to make sure they're still alive, and at that moment, Nashitania catches up and resumes her attacks. Adlet deploys smoke bombs to hide, but the princess still manages to track him. She wounds him as he flees through the forest, but even injured, he keeps running. Then, Nashitania lands a serious blow and traps him, satisfied with herself. Thinking back on their journey together, Adlet tells her he always saw her as a comrade, and that working as a team, they'd have no reason to fear the demon god. The princess tells him to stop lying, claiming he betrayed her, but Adlet swears he never tried to kill or set up any of his companions. She doesn't believe him and says he won't fool her. Losing blood, Adlet begins to shake. As he's about to pass out, he sees Nashitania going for the kill, and with sheer effort, he blocks her strike with his hands and kicks her away. Goldoff arrives at that moment, forcing Adlet to run for his life. Shedding his gear as he flees, he laments realizing too late that he's on the brink of death. Suddenly, Goldoff lunges with his weapon, and Adlet barely manages to block in time. But in his weakened state, he can't stop Goldoff from striking him and sending him hurtling straight toward Mora. With a wry smile, Adlet thanks Goldoff for the favor, since he no longer had the strength to keep running. He then reminds Goldoff of when they were all heading toward the temple and were ambushed in this very spot. When Goldoff asks what he means, Nashitania and Mora cut him off, ordering him to kill Adlet. Goldoff instead suggests they interrogate him first. They refuse, sure that he won't talk, until Nashitania suddenly notices something. In the distance, she sees Chamo walking with Hans, leaving her shocked. Adlet scolds Hans for taking so long and asks where he was. Hans apologizes, saying they were looking for him to show him something they'd found. Seeing that his companions are alive, Nashitania feels regret for hurting Adlet for nothing. She and Goldoff both ask Mora why Hans is uninjured. Mora admits she lied about that, but insists Adlet is still the imposter. At that moment, Adlet interrupts, explaining what it really means to be the world's strongest man. He asks them who else besides him could have made it this far alive. Then he declares that it's time to defeat the Seventh Brave. The scene shifts as Adlet lays out the entire story of how they were deceived. Mora argues his theory is wrong, that the Saint of Mist would need a powerful barrier to blanket the forest. Adlet cuts her off, saying there is a saint who could create mist instantly. He reminds her that she once admitted she didn't know the true extent of every saint's powers. But, he adds, it's not the saints who don't understand, it's their lack of knowledge of science. He explains how fog forms. Tiny water droplets condense in the air. The higher the temperature, the more water vapor builds up. If the temperature suddenly drops, that vapor turns into droplets that float in the air, creating fog. Chamo says she doesn't get it, so Adlet explains that because the forest's humidity is so high, a sudden temperature drop would instantly cause fog. Mora argues that this changes nothing, since both the Saint of Ice and the Saint of Snow would need a massive barrier to make it happen. Adlet counters that she lacks imagination. You don't need to lower the temperature. You raise it, he says. Everyone realizes at once that the mist could have been created by the Saint of the Sun. Adlet confirms this is his hypothesis and asks Mora if it's possible. She reluctantly admits it might be. Fmy then speaks up, explaining that Ryura, the Saint of the Sun, has legs so weak she needs a wheelchair, but the sun god's power within her is still as strong as ever. Adlet concludes that Ryura was likely kidnapped and forced to cooperate. He then asks if they found it strange how hot it was when they first arrived near this area. He believes those who greeted them at the fortress were working with the Seventh, tricking them from the start. If someone else knew how to activate the barrier, the plan would have failed, but that was unlikely, since the king kept that knowledge under strict control. Finally, he says that perhaps after they opened the temple door, the Seventh signaled the monsters to kill Ryura. With the Saint of the Sun's power gone, the temperature would plummet instantly, covering the forest in fog. From there, the Seventh just had to innocently approach the altar and activate the barrier. Mora snaps back, saying he has no proof, only speculation, but Adlet says he's not finished. The final puzzle is this: where was Ryura's body hidden? He explains that despite the forest's size, there are few places to hide a body. If it had been buried, Chamo would have found it immediately. Right then, Hans speaks up to announce that he's found the body. Adlet nods, saying the best place to hide a corpse is among other corpses. He asks Fmy if the monster in question was among those they fought. Both she and the princess say they would have remembered it if they'd seen it. Adlet then orders Hans to retrieve Ryura's body. When Hans shows it to Mora, he asks if it's really her, and when she confirms it, he tells everyone this proves Adlet's innocence. Mora still insists it could be a trap Adlet set to clear his name, but Fmy argues that if that were true, he would have shared this theory much earlier, and that he has already risked his life multiple times in the process. At last, Mora admits she was wrong to judge him, and right at that moment, Adlet collapses, smiling and finally having proven his innocence. But Chamo wakes him up to ask who killed the old woman, and Adlet answers that it was probably the monster. Adlet suddenly declares that the seventh brave is Mora, instantly enraging everyone. The princess turns to Fmy, telling her to protect Adlet, and orders Goldoff not to let Mora escape, but Mora raises her voice, insisting she's not the imposter either, and demands they present proof of her guilt. Nashitania replies that no proof is needed, there are no other suspects left, but Adlet steps in, agreeing with Mora. There's no actual evidence against her. Standing up, he begins wondering aloud who the culprit could be if it isn't Mora. Suddenly, Chamo interrupts, saying, "The granny can't be the imposter." She then pulls out some wooden tablets she found. She explains that she destroyed the temple floor and dug up a large box containing a sword and the tablets. Hans points out that one of them is identical to the one inside the temple, and the sword is exactly the same as the one on the altar. That means, he concludes, whoever activated the barrier was careful enough to prepare a spare activation set. The question now is, why are there two tablets? Hans says the real problem is the second tablet because it contains instructions for deactivating the barrier and then reactivating it again using a surprising method. To reactivate, one must remove the sword and the broken tablet, repeat the activation process, pour blood over the sword, recite the words, and finally destroy the tablet. Adlet asks if these items are genuine, and Chamo assures him they're identical to the altars. Hans then asks who broke the tablet. Chamo says she doesn't know. When she arrived, it was already broken, and demands to know who did it. Adlet thinks back and realizes it was Nashitania who broke it. Hans can't believe it, but Fmy confirms it. Everyone is shocked, even Nashitania herself, who looks confused. Hans prepares to strike, admitting he initially thought Goldoff was the culprit. Goldoff instantly positions himself in front of the princess to protect her. Nashitania confesses that yes, she broke the tablet, but claims she never thought it would activate the barrier and begs Adlet to speak up, saying she knows he's not the seventh brave. But Adlet, remembering their journey together, is frozen in place, stunned. Then he realizes that the trap required one very specific condition, that the first brave to reach the temple would fall for it. And who sent him to the temple first? The princess. Rage wells up inside him. Nashitania backs away and, to everyone's shock, calmly admits she's the seventh brave. Goldoff collapses to his knees in despair, and she approaches him to apologize. She admits she could have gotten away with it, but Adlet's actions ruined her plans. She also admits to one mistake. She knew about the spare activation set, but didn't know one of the tablets contained instructions for activating the barrier. Smiling, she says she regrets not being able to kill any of them. She had hoped to at least take down two, but maybe she failed because she wasn't aggressive enough. In hindsight, she says she should have gotten close enough to kill Adlet herself, or made Goldoff do it. But things seemed to be going so smoothly that she didn't bother, thinking Adlet was easy to fool. She admits she never imagined he would figure her out, and even turns to Hans, calling him the hardest opponent to beat. In the end, she has to admit Adlet was right. Without him, she probably would have won. Mora cuts in, asking why she wanted to kill them, or if her real goal was to ally with the demon god. Nashitania says she should never have gone through with it, and that the best thing would have been to ask for their help from the start. Goldoff asks what she was trying to do, swearing he would have followed her anywhere. But the princess says if he had truly followed her orders without question, she would have told him the whole truth, and mocks him for claiming loyalty now. Chamo asks why she tried to kill them. Nashitania replies that her goal was to achieve true peace, a world where humans and monsters could live together. To do that, she needed to revive the demon god, which meant eliminating the braves. Now that she's been found out, she politely asks them to step aside so she can deal with the demon god when he awakens. She claims she won't let it destroy the human world. because she loves humans and monsters equally. Mora demands a clearer explanation. Nashitania says she wanted reconciliation between humans and monsters, and while dangers would remain, there would be peace. The cost, however, would be around 500,000 lives. The Braves, stunned, can't believe what they're hearing. Led by Adlet, they prepare to take her down, but suddenly, the princess changes shape. Before vanishing into a strong scent, she says she's sorry she couldn't convince them. Adlet recognizes the smell. It's an advanced monster technique. As she blends into the surroundings, Nashitania's voice reaches each brave individually. Hans uses this to try to pinpoint her location and leads the group after her. In the chaos, Adlet collapses. Mora orders Fmy to take care of him. Worried, Fmy begs him to hold on a little longer. While tending to him, Adlet says she seems kinder, like the first time they met. He tries to confess his love, but Fmy tells him she hates him because he makes her want to keep living. Seeing him near death, she uses her mouth to give him medicine. The scene shifts, and Adlet wakes in the temple, under Mora's care. She apologizes for not being Fmy, and explains that she used mountain herbs infused with vitality. She apologizes again for not realizing sooner that he was a true hero. He tells her it's all in the past, and asks her to make amends with the others. Hans says she already has, and informs him the barrier vanished when Nashitania dispelled it before leaving. Adlet goes outside and finds Chamo, asking where Goldoff is. She points him out, saying he's in bad shape and won't respond to anything. Adlet laments not being able to help right now, then takes a moment to enjoy the sunlight. Later, he finds Fmy, who says she's sorry his favorite turned out to be the 7th Brave. He asks what she means, and she says she doesn't want to talk to him right now because she needs time. But before she goes, he says he wants to know 2 things. First, will she fight alongside the group instead of alone? Without hesitation, Fmy says yes. Second, is it true that being with him makes her want to live? Blushing, she admits it is. Overjoyed, Adlet tells her to fight with him to defeat the demon god and survive. In the next scene, the Braves gather, determined to continue their mission. Suddenly, a young woman appears, apologizing for arriving late. She recognizes Adlet and greets him warmly, saying it's been a while. Fmy asks who she is, and the newcomer introduces herself as Rolonia, the Saint of Blood. Mora asks why she's here, and Rolonia says that while she doesn't think she's worthy of being a brave, she'll do her best to help. Her words surprise everyone, even more so when she shows she also bears the 6-petaled mark. Rolonia then asks why, if they're the 6 Braves, there are 7 of them. At that moment, Doltom III, King of Gwenbyre, arrives with the Royal Guard. He says he came after hearing the Phantom Barrier was activated, and is relieved to see them safe. He then informs them that all the monsters on the continent are heading toward the forest, around 2,000 in total. Hearing the number, Fmy suggests retreat, and Rolonia agrees. But Chamo is firmly against it, and both Hans and Mora side with her. Fmy eyes Rolonia and wonders if she laid a trap for them in advance. Hans adds that maybe she expected them to retreat. Mora intervenes, asking them to calm down, and assures them Rolonia is not their enemy, though the argument only grows louder. Doltom cuts them off, asking why there are 7 Braves instead of 6. Adlet says it's pointless to explain, and declares himself the world's strongest man. Then he asks the king for a favor: activate the Phantom Barrier. The king says he has enough water and supplies to hold out, so he can activate it right away. Adlet asks him to do it in 30 minutes and keep it active until the demon god is defeated. He then declares himself leader of the Braves, arguing he's the only one whose authenticity is certain. Hans admits he still has doubts, but says there's no better choice right now. Mora agrees to follow him for now, and the rest eventually accept his leadership. In the final scene, the barrier is activated once more, and the Braves prepare to cross into the land of the howling demons. Adlet warns them, with the exit sealed, there's no turning back until